it's Flo, and this is my impression of a tech-savvy royal family. Yes, ever since the palace became Wi-Fi enabled, it's become so easy to use the Name Your Price tool on Progressive.com. I do agree, my queen. Simply telling it what we want to spend and seeing all our policy options, I'll send a screenshot to Duke, the Duke of Kent. No, my friend Duke. We're in a group chat together. LOL.
It's easy to find insurance that fits your budget with the Name Your Price tool at Progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company. Price and coverage match limited by state law.
Blog Talk Radio.
Hey, welcome everybody to another edition of The Grueling Truth. I'm your host, Mike Goodpaster. Gerald Riggs was supposed to call in tonight, but he hasn't so far. But as always, we always have a backup plan. But first, let me welcome in my co-host tonight. We have dual co-host. We have Matt Andruscavage.
Thanks, Mike. Good to be here.
And Joe Rodriguez.
Hi, Mike. Matt, happy to be here as well.
All right, so we figured that we would go ahead and discuss an article I wrote today for Sports Rants on 10 men who deserve to be in the Hall of Fame who are not. I think we start off here with the process of electing players into the Hall of Fame, which I'm sure nobody's really clear about, but it seems to be a lot of guys that were born after 1980. It's more of a popularity contest, wouldn't you say, Matt?
Yeah, I think so. It seems to be political, or it has some element of NFL politics involved, and it doesn't seem to be just driven based on what you did when you played.
What's your opinion, Joe?
I'm very much in agreement. One of the most visible and vocal guys is Peter King, and I take what he writes with pretty much a grain of salt.
So you're saying basically that you think he's kind of a moron?
I think that Peter King really doesn't know a whole lot about what he's talking about. He reminds me of movie critics. Movie critics don't really know the process of making a film or what goes into making a film. They just have a style of writing that grabs an audience and people think they're an expert. That's Peter King.
Boy, I couldn't agree more. That's exactly how it is.
All right. The way we figured this, I'll just go down to 10. They're not in any order necessarily. You guys can interject your thoughts, what you think about them. And then if you guys have anything you want to add or any players you want to add after, we'll discuss that also. My number one guy was Robert Brazile. Played for the Houston Oilers for, 9 years, made the Pro Bowl 7 times. He's the original prototype 3-4 pass rushing outside linebacker. Everybody always gives that to Lawrence Taylor and Bill Belichick coaching him, but it was more Bum Phillips who brought in Robert Brazile and played that position before Lawrence Taylor did. I'm not saying that he played it as well as Taylor, but I don't think there's a huge difference in between them. I think the bigger difference was one played in Houston, which is not as big a market as New York, but he's the only guy that was a linebacker on the 1970s all-decade team who's not in Canton. He had almost 1,300 tackles in his career, 48 sacks, 13 interceptions, and to this day holds the record for most straight games played by an outside linebacker, which I didn't know was even kept as a record until I did the research on him, at 147. I think the big difference between him and Lawrence Taylor, outside of just the New York-Houston thing, was that Robert Brazile was not a guy that was look at me. Where LT, I don't think he had a problem bringing attention to himself, where I think Brazile was more of a quiet, humble guy. And the thing is, out of the 10 guys I have on this list, I would say probably almost every one of them you could say that about, which I think leads us back to what we talked about before, where it is a popularity contest. And if you sit there and scream out, look at me, and look at everything I've done, and you go make predictions, that writers like to write about that. They remember that, and that's why they put you in. So what are your guys' feelings? We'll start off with Joe on Robert Brazile.
Robert Brazile is one of my favorite players. To me, I don't know how popular this opinion will be. he's in the conversation with Jack Ham and Lawrence Taylor as among the greatest outside linebackers, and Bobby Bell, the greatest outside linebackers who ever played the position. What made him so tremendous was that he was complete. He could play the pass. He could rush the passer. He was fast, too. He could run and he could hit. It was a tremendous player.
Matt?
I did a little bit of research as well. I admit I'm pretty versed on most of the great players of the 70s. Robert Brazil is one that escaped me. I had to do a little bit of research on him and found that he was basically a really complete linebacker, like Joe said. And there might be guys that I might throw ahead of him, but from what I can find out, this guy definitely deserves to be in the conversation.
Yeah. Now, number 2 for me is one that Joe, years ago, started banging home on me. He was a New York Jet, part of the New York Sack Exchange. It was Joe Klecko. And, I mean, in 1981, they had 66 sacks. The New York Sack Exchange did. I think it was him, Abdul Salam, Marty Lyons, and Mark Gastineau. I mean, Klecko had 20 and a half sacks. He was the 1981 NFL Defensive Player of the Year. But the one thing that got me about him is when I looked into him, which I did not know, was that he started his career as a defensive end, went to the Pro Bowl. He had an injury, I think 82 or 83. I think in 82 he had an injury, only played a game. They moved him to defensive tackle in 1983. He makes the Pro Bowl. In 1985 they come in and they install a 3-4 defense instead of a 4-3. They put him at nose tackle and he makes the Pro Bowl again. He's the only player in NFL history outside of Frank Gifford to play 3 different positions and make the Pro Bowl. Now, as we talked, you had Mark Gastineau there, which when people talk New York Sack Exchange, most people's first thought is Mark Gastineau because he's a look-at-me guy. You know, he was a moron. He'd make a sack and he'd get up and do a dance, you know, like he was at a bad discotheque in the 1970s. So, I mean, it's just true. I mean, Mark Gastineau was a one-trick pony. He rushed a quarterback. Joe Klecko could do everything. What's your thoughts on Joe Klecko, Matt?
That's how I feel about it as well. Joe Klecko, to me, was what made the New York Sack Exchange great. He was great at everything. Gastineau obviously was very good, but I think Klecko is more deserving of the notoriety than Mark Gastineau. I mean, Joe might know a little bit more about this, though, because you're the New York guy.
I watched Klecko his entire career. He was one of my all-time favorite players. I've been talking about him to Mike for years. What made Klecko unique was, if you look at him, he's built kind of like a nose tackle, kind of like a Jim Burt. But he was deceptively quick, as evidenced by his many sacks that year with the Sack Exchange playing defensive end. He was very quick, very strong, could play the run, could play the pass. And when he made his play, he just walked back to the huddle. You know, and he left the dancing to Gastineau, which brings up an interesting story, which I know Mike is very aware of, that 83 game against the Rams, the Jets, where Gastineau did a dance, and Jackie Slater let him have it, literally and figuratively.
That was a great game, too.
Yeah,
but
Jackie Slater,
they
got into a huge fight.
The other thing that got me about him when I was doing the research was Dwight Stevenson, who's one of the greatest centers in NFL history, said that Joe Klecko was one of the 2 toughest guys he ever had to block. And the same thing, Joe DeLamielleure, you remember the great guard that played for the Bills, said that Klecko was hands down the toughest guy he ever had to defend.
And
so
both
we
go
to number
Hall of Fame.
All right, hey, let's get to the main part of this show, all right? We know how Matt always likes to bring up. Well, it could be, but Joe Klecko's not on the line, so we can't really call it the Joe Klecko show. But can't call it the Gerald Riggs show either, because Gerald Riggs is nowhere to be seen, but I'm not going to bring that up anymore. But so the big one now is we're going to bring up a player that gets overlooked, which he shouldn't. I mean, because he is on by far probably the greatest franchise in NFL history. I mean, you all know who I'm talking about. It's the elephant in the room. Anytime you're talking about this team, you're talking greatness. And that would be Kenny Anderson of the Cincinnati Bengals. Kenny Anderson. We're talking the Bengals, not the 49ers. I mean, come on. You guys win championships.
I had to throw it in there.
I mean, that's just, I mean, come on. Jeff Garcia is, I mean, Yeah, Aaron Garcia is a better Arena Football League quarterback. Go look that up. But my number 3 is Kenny Anderson. Kenny Anderson was widely known as one of the first quarterbacks to run the West Coast offense under Bill Walsh. I mean, luckily the Bengals hired Bill Tiger Johnson instead of Bill Walsh, because that would have ruined Walsh's career if he'd have been with the Bengals. But as the offensive coordinator with the Bengals, up through 1975, I believe it was, Anderson was a quarterback that nobody really seen before. I mean, he was a guy that was completing 60% of his passes in the mid-'70s when nobody did that. He led the NFL in passing on 4 separate occasions, 1974, 75, and then later in 81 and 82 under Lindy Infante, who was also a great offensive coordinator. He was also named the league MVP in 1981. In 82, he became the first quarterback in NFL history to complete 70% of his passes for an entire season. He also set the record in 1982 for most consecutive complete passes in a single game with 20 against Houston. He also, now this is a big part for me, is when I was 8 years old, he said hi to me at training camp. But
well, there you go.
What's your take on Kenny Anderson, Joe? And if anybody says anything bad about Kenny Anderson, they will be muted.
Kenny Anderson was another guy, very unassuming. He was just so quietly efficient. But the other quality of his game, terrific arm, great bad weather quarterback. You know, he played in arguably the coldest game in NFL history in that championship game against the Chargers. He also killed my Giants in the snow game, I remember, which I unfortunately, and Mike fortunately has a copy of. He could run. He was super accurate, as Mike mentioned. A tremendous player. And what hurt him, I think, he didn't win Super Bowl 16.
Yeah, it hurt me too. Matt?
I know.
Ken Anderson, I've been arguing for Ken Anderson for a long time. What I like about Ken Anderson is, like Joe said about his scrambling. And what you said about his accuracy, getting that 70%, that record stood all the way to just a couple of years ago when Drew Brees broke that. So that record stood for, 20, almost 30 years. Pretty impressive. That's and the thing about the 1970s is it was still very much a downfield passing era, and you just didn't have guys completing 60 to 65% of their passes. Super accurate, and I think if it weren't for the goal line stand in Super Bowl 16, Ken Anderson probably leads them back and wins that Super Bowl, and that definitely would cement his legacy.
Yeah, because the Bengals were the superior team. Just say it, Matt. You got lucky.
We actually discussed this. I agree. In '81, the Bengals were the better team.
Okay, they need to turn the rings in then. But hey, we got a caller on the line.
Hey, Mike. How you doing?
Welcome, caller. All right, how you doing?
Dave from Massachusetts. I'm doing well. How are you?
How you doing, Dave? I'm sure you probably got a Patriot to add to the list, right?
Actually, Ty Law.
Ty Law? I would go more Julius Adams.
Him too. But yeah,
so what you got for us tonight?
I think overall the guys on the 10 guys you listed, say, in your article are probably more deserving. The guys that really stuck out to me were L.C. Greenwood, Roger Craig, Tom Flores, and I think they all, they were all part of great teams, but they kind of lost, due to their team's greatness, their individual accomplishments weren't appropriately recognized.
Well, I think you mentioned Tom Flores. I'm going to keep you on the line. You can respond to this. The Tom Flores thing to me is there's not a lot of Raiders from 80 or 83 in the Hall of Fame. But I think the big thing that hurt Tom Flores was the fact that people assumed that Al Davis was coaching the team. But my argument with that is always this, though. if Al Davis was coaching the team, he was coaching them when John Madden was there too, and John Madden only won one Super Bowl, and he's in the Hall of Fame. And then my biggest argument is, when have they won a Super Bowl since Tom Flores left?
They haven't.
Yeah.
And do you believe Merv Levy should be a Hall of Fame coach?
Borderline.
What makes him borderline even?
Because, the team was very talented. At worst, he didn't get in the way. But they didn't win a Super Bowl.
Yeah, but see, to me, you can't be a borderline coach because you didn't get in the way. The thing, he went to Kansas City from 78 through 83 and failed miserably trying to run a wing T offense. And the fact that he never won anything. And they put him in, and guys like Dan Reeves. Dan Reeves didn't win anything as a head coach. But Dan Reeves took teams in Denver that were nowhere near what Buffalo had. And if you look at Buffalo, there are 5 AFC championship games. The only really complete team that they played that was any good, and it's not just because I'm a Bengals fan, was the 88 Bengals, and they lost that game. You look at their other championship games. It didn't. Hey, Matt, I think me and Dave were having a conversation. You need to be quiet, all right? But now, see, you made me lose my train of thought, which is pretty easy to do as I get older, and I've taken a bunch of blows to the head in my life. But if you look at the teams they beat in those championships, and to me, 1990, Super Bowl 25, Joe's a Giants fan. Joe can tell you the Giants were nowhere near as good as the Bills. The difference in that game was the coaching. And that was a Hall of Fame coach with, who was the quarterback there, Jeff Hostetler, that comes out and beats Buffalo. Plus, my other thing is, you got to be, who was it? I think it was Ron Borges from the Boston Globe. You probably know who he is, where he said, if you're going to be in the Hall of Fame, they shouldn't be able to write the history of the game without you. And with Tom Flores, that can be said. I mean, he's the first minority starting quarterback, first minority to be a head coach, first minority to win a Super Bowl. And with Merv Levy, there's nothing innovative. He brought nothing new to the game. Do you agree with that?
I would agree with that.
I mean, because the best thing they can come up with him was a no-huddle offense. The only problem with that, he invented it 2 years after the Bengals beat him with it in 1988. Mm-hmm.
And I would also agree that the Dan Reeves teams overachieved. That Broncos team was pretty average, other than Elway, from a talent perspective, and that Falcons team in '98 that went 14-2, definitely overachieved as well.
Well, I think his best coaching job may have been, what was that, Joe, in 1993 with the Giants?
Yeah, he took a decent Giant team, and they came within an eyelash of being the number 1 seed that year, where they lost in overtime to the Cowboys in the Emmitt Smith separated shoulder game that every time I think about it, my eyes well up with tears.
That one of those games that still haunts you.
Yeah, like the 2002 wild card game against the Niners, but I'm not going to bring that up.
Hey, do you ever notice, Joe, how the 49er fan always seems to get really excited when we talk about being devastated by losses? He always pipes in.
I get plenty of devastation in my own life.
Just like we're not going to talk about Super Bowl 42.
Yeah, 42 was good, and 42 and 46 are two of my favorites.
Oh, remember, we're talking to a Patriots fan, Joe.
Yeah,
I know. I heard. He seems to be a nice
and
one,
he really
too,
has
so,
no reason to complain either. Once you've won, see, none of you guys really have any heartache. Because, if you start feeling bad, you can always pop in a tape of a highlight film or a game from when you won the Super Bowl. With me, I'm still stuck in the 1988 AFC Championship game.
Yeah, you really do have it tough there. I give you that.
So, Dave, a couple things before I let you go. I mean, number one is, who's one guy on here that wasn't on the list that you think really belongs in the Hall of Fame, or is there one?
Drew Pearson.
Drew Pearson. I think that's on Matt's list, isn't it, Matt?
Drew Pearson definitely gets close. I'm probably leaning more towards Cliff Branch over Drew Pearson, but Drew Pearson definitely in before Lynn Swann.
Well, yeah, definitely. I mean, Drew Pearson should be in just because Lynn Swann's in. But
right.
What do you think about the Cliff Branch Drew Pearson comparison, Dave?
I think they both deserve to be in. We're splitting hairs at this point. Definitely both deserve to be in.
Alrighty. Friday night, are you going to join us for the Mayweather-Pacquiao preview show, Dave?
I will dial in.
All right. Me and Joe will be hosting it, and we're probably going to try to get maybe a boxer or so in here. But if you want, you come on from the start, give your opinion. We'll give our picks, and we'll see who's right and who's wrong. I think all three of us. Right. We need to get somebody like Floyd Mayweather for that, though, because I think we're all three. Our hearts say one thing, and our heads are kind of worried. But
yeah, pretty much.
Do you want me to put you on? Do you want me to put you on mute so you can listen to it here, or do you want me to go ahead and let you go?
Yes, that would be great. Thanks, Mike.
Put you on mute. All right. Thanks a lot, Dave.
All right.
Thanks a lot, Dave.
Dave, Patriots at Giants this year, regular season, so we'll have to argue when that time comes.
All right.
He's
we'll
on
get
mute,
to our
so
next
he can't
one.
even answer.
So what you guys, you can say anything you want to the Patriot fan now. We'll have to get some Dolphin fans on here. They probably got something to say to him. What's you guys' take on Tom Flores? We'll start with you first, Matt.
Oh, yeah, Tom Flores, and I don't want to just say he belongs there just because John Madden's in or Marv Levy is in. Tom Flores actually did accomplish a lot. Like you said, he didn't win with John Madden's team. There was a lot of different players in 80 and in 83, and he was probably really responsible for resurrecting Jim Plunkett's career. I mean, Jim Plunkett was a very good quarterback. He did put up some numbers in the 70s, but he got really good once he showed up on the Raiders under Tom Flores, and to win 2 Super Bowls and to not get credit. I mean, what other coach has won 2 Super Bowls and is not in the Hall of Fame? That's eligible.
Jimmy
You're
Johnson,
a 49er coach.
What's that?
Yeah, Seifert and Johnson.
Seifert.
But you know what? Johnson should definitely be in the Hall of Fame, and I think Seifert's got.
Yeah.
I think Seifert was a heck of a coach. It's underrated.
Yeah, Seifert
now,
was
I think
really
the thing that hurt Seifert is he kind of did take Bill Walsh's team.
Yeah, I think I might have been able to win with the 89 team. But Seifert was a good coach. He was a quiet guy. He let the players play and kept the system the same, kept everything the same. But you can make a much stronger argument that he won with Walsh's team than you could that Tom Flores won with Madden's team.
What's your opinion on Flores, Joe?
I think Flores is definitely deserving. We're talking about coaches that have won 2 Super Bowls and are not in the Hall of Fame. I think you can win 1 and get in some magical ride, but I think if you win 2, you're definitely deserving, because you have the Barry Switzers and even the Mike Ditkas, who's won 1. They've had 1 year. Barry Switzer definitely was just a caretaker for that team. But I think if you win twice, it's no fluke. With Seifert, it's no fluke, and definitely with Tom Flores, absolutely not. A really tremendous coach. You don't see him in any footage. You don't see the histrionics on the sideline. He's not jumping up and down. His face is not turning beet red. He's not throwing things around. He's just, the biggest thing you see Tom Flores do on the sideline is maybe put his hands on his hips. Then you say, oh, okay, coach is angry. That's it. That team played under control. They played with poise. They were tough. They were hard nosed. They were tremendous teams, and he was a big part of it. He deserves to be in 100%.
Yeah. Plus, he was on our show, which made him 100% in. But he was a great guy too. My next one would be L.C. Greenwood, which is one until about, I think when he passed away. I think he passed away 2 years ago, maybe 3 years ago. I didn't realize until then when I read it in the story that he wasn't in the Hall of Fame. I just assumed he was in the Hall of Fame. I mean, it's L.C. Greenwood. I mean, he was 6'6", 260 pounds. I mean, he was a monster. He was on one of the greatest defenses in NFL history. and I really don't understand how L.C. Greenwood's not in. I mean, you don't even have to read the stats with him. It's just he's L.C. Greenwood. You know, he wore the gold shoes. He was another one that's on the all-decade team in the 1970s, 73.5 career sacks. But the big thing I think that separates him from a lot of guys is this. He played in 4 Super Bowls, had 5 sacks, and played probably better than Mean Joe Green in every one of those Super Bowl games. What's your take on L.C. Greenwood, Joe?
I'm on the fence with L.C. How much was L.C. Greenwood, and how much did he benefit from playing with great defensive tackles? And Dwight White was a very good player. Joe Green is one of the great tackles of all time. Ernie Holmes was a great player that it's pretty much forgotten these days. People remember him more for his arrowhead haircut than for what a great player he truly was. So I'm on the fence with LC. I know he had tremendous ability.
Okay, so are you on the fence? Are you on the fence with Mean Joe Green?
No, Mean Joe Green dominated, and he dominated when that team was horrible.
But Mean Joe Green, when what team was horrible?
The Steelers.
The Pittsburgh Steelers were never horrible when Mean Joe Green was there.
No, he when he was drafted, they were 1-13 the season before. That team, it took a few years for that team.
They were pretty. But my point is this: how can you say that L.C. Greenwood may not have been that great because he played next to Mean Joe Green, but L.C. Greenwood or Mean Joe Green? I mean, why is not the same question there? He played around with all those great players around him.
He was one of the great players that they played with. I mean, he was there first. I don't know. He was great before those guys joined. That's what I'm on the fence with LC. I'm not saying he shouldn't be, and I'm just on the fence with him.
Well, we'll just agree that you're wrong on this one. What do you think, Matt? Do you want to be wrong too, Matt?
No, I'm basically okay. I kind of see both sides on this one. If I'm gonna be pinned up against the wall, I thought I was kind of like you, Mike. I thought he was in. I thought the whole front four was in. Because like you said, Dwight White and Ernie Holmes were all the whole front. It wasn't called the Steel Curtain for nothing. I thought they were all in. I was really surprised that he wasn't in too. I guess it's harder to measure before they were really keeping track of stuff. It's a little harder for me to measure defensive ends and defensive linemen from the 70s. I feel like I got a little bit easier time in the 80s. I mean, I've seen quite a lot. I think L.C. Greenwood was as deserving as probably anybody else. But on the other hand, there is something to be said for, how much did he benefit from playing on the line? I don't know. If I'm pinned against the wall, I got to say you got to put him in.
Okay, then Joe, you will be in timeout for the next 2 minutes. We've got about 2.5 minutes. Yeah, we can bring Dave back, put you on mute. But I don't know Dave's feelings on L.C. Greenwood, and I don't want to be shocked by he don't think he should be in, and then I've already cut you. But we get 2 minutes left for the live show. Then you can come back and listen to the entire podcast at the top of the hour at midnight. Remember, tomorrow night on the Red Light Sports Network, we have a 3-hour draft special as the draft happens. You can come back to the Grueling Truth tomorrow night at 11:30, and Matt and I, and possibly Joe, as Courtney, if he can stay up that late. Joe's getting a little bit older. We will be on at 11:30 to go over the draft. And okay, Dave just sent me a message, and he really did. It says that Greenwood needs to be in. So, Joe. Thin ice, Joe. Thin ice. All right, let's play along the rest of the way. But now my next one is another one we had on the show a few weeks ago. He's unfortunately a San Francisco 49er, but, it's Roger Craig, which I think the stat that says the most to me about Craig is not even the 1,000 yards rushing and receiving in a season. It's the fact he played on 3 different teams for a decade and made the playoffs every year. What's your opinion on Roger Craig, Matt?
No matter what I say,
do you think he should be in, or do you think he shouldn't?
Well, I do think he should be in, but I have been on the fence. I remember when I first learned of the stat that he made the playoff every season. part of me is like, well, yeah, he contributed on those on the Raider teams and the Vikings, but part of me is like, well, I don't know if that really would be the driving force behind it, because, like the Vikings, I don't remember Roger Craig doing a lot for the Vikings to get them into the playoffs, but it's still a good stat. I'm probably
more
but
a lot of that's locker room presence too, and somebody that's been there
there's
before.
Something to that, right? He does bring the winning attitude, and he does bring the work ethic. In that sense, yeah, I'm with you. I'm probably more the thousand thing to me is that was huge. I think he really was a pioneer for what you have to be, for what today's running backs have to do. You can't just be one-dimensional. Most of these guys have to be multi-dimensional. They got to be able to block. They got to be able to catch out of the backfield. They got to do a number of things, and that's what Roger Craig brought to the game.
Joe?
Roger Craig would have been great in any era, including today. He was a complete player, and if I didn't hate him so much because he was a Niner, I would love him.
He did more to me than he ever did to you. Actually, he helped you out in 1990.
He helped you out in 1990, right?
Yeah, come on.
Eric Howard made a great play.
All right. My next one is a guy that I think is one of the greatest running backs I ever saw. Doesn't matter to me how long he played. That was Terrell Davis. I mean, to me, the NFL, the Hall of Fame, is about having the greatest players. This guy was one of the greatest running backs I think ever played the game. In his first 4 seasons, he rushed for almost 6,500 yards, averaged 4.8 yards a carry. Only Earl Campbell and Eric Dickerson have ever had a better first 4-season run. No other running back in history even comes close, I think, to matching his 56 touchdowns in his first 4 years. And in Super Bowl 32, he cemented his greatness by becoming the first player to score 3 touchdowns in the Super Bowl, throw in his 3 rushing touchdowns. Throw in his 1998 season where he was named the NFL MVP. He ran for over 2,000 yards. And really, he's what got John Elway over the top to win 2 Super Bowls. What's your opinion of Terrell Davis, Joe?
Like Dave's favorite, Tom Brady, a 6th-round draft pick, and just an unbelievable player, just a perfect running back. It's no coincidence that Elway finally got over the hump with Terrell Davis in the backfield. I'm very sad when I think about him, though, from a professional standpoint, because he had many more years of greatness ahead of him, and that injury was just too much to overcome.
Matt?
Terrell Davis is one of the best running backs I have ever seen. He comes in the league in '95, and we're not sure if he's going to make the team. He's a special team stud, and he ends up making the team. And then he gets the reins, rushes for over 1,000 yards his first year. The '96 Broncos, that was a really good team that a lot of people forget about. It's just a shame that they did lose in that playoff game. And if you look at his numbers, he gets better and better each year. In '97, they go to the Super Bowl basically on his back. And, that Super Bowl was really close, but that's only because Terrell Davis gets hurt in the first quarter. He misses the entire second quarter. He still rushes for, I believe, real close to 160 yards, 3 touchdowns, just ran over everybody. Then you go in 1998, follows it up with a 2,000-yard season. But the thing about that season, you watch those games, they were dominating opponents, and he was sitting out the fourth quarter. I think pretty sure it was Neil Smith that said, this is a guy that could have run for 2,500 yards that year, but he was sitting out a lot of fourth quarters because they were so far ahead. It's just one of the best running backs. The guy had everything. He was able to. He was elusive. He'd make one cut and then he would just go. I think he had a better nose for the end zone than Emmitt Smith did. He was just every bit a franchise running back that you would want on your team.
Joe?
Total agreement. Terrell Davis should be in. Hopefully he will get in. These guys will come to their senses.
All right, here's one that I think always drives me nuts, and that's Dan Reeves. So I'm going to give you another Marv Levy comparison. I mean, Dan Reeves lost more Super Bowls than Marv Levy, but he also won a couple. I mean, he made it to the Super Bowl as a player, as an assistant coach, as a head coach. He took 3 different teams to the NFL playoffs. I think he was a really underrated player, too. I mean, if you look back at that 66 season, I believe it was, he was a big part. I think their starting running back goes down. He comes out and plays really well the rest of the year. He was the coach of the year not just once but twice in 93 and 98. He led the Falcons to the Super Bowl. He took the Broncos to the Super Bowl. And is there anybody that really thinks that any of the Super Bowls he was the head coach in, I mean, does anybody really think that they even had much of a chance in those games? I mean, to me, the 87 game possibly. But outside of that, they were physically outmatched in almost every Super Bowl they played in. What's your opinion on Dan Reeves, Joe?
Love Dan Reeves. And he took over for the immortal Ray Handley with the Giants, so I'm going to love Dan Reeves. Unfortunately,
Ray Handley,
I should be nice. Handley may be listening.
I don't think he is. I think he's hanging out with Michael Sams, but that's probably not the joke to tell. Go ahead.
Anytime that Dan Reeves had a competent quarterback, he was not just successful, he was very successful. He had Phil Simms in 93. Of course, he had John Elway. And then he had, name escapes me, with the Falcons. He was a good quarterback.
Crystal Chandelier.
Yes. But then when he had the great Dave Brown, the Giants, surprisingly, bombed. So anytime he had a decent quarterback, that the team overachieved, and he was a heck of a coach. I'm a huge Dan Reeves fan. He should be in already. I'm surprised he's not.
Matt?
I like Dan Reeves as well. I do think he took some pretty average Broncos teams. It was basically him and John Elway willing that team to the Super Bowl. And like you said, Mike, the only game he probably had a chance in was that 87 game. Otherwise, I mean, the 86 Giants, 89 Niners, the 98 Broncos, it just wasn't going to happen. But I think if the standard is Marv Levy is in, so, then yes, he definitely belongs in. If I'm doing a top 10 list, there's probably a couple of guys I'd rather see go in before him, but I think he's deserving, especially if Marv Levy is in.
Well, I believe this. The one good thing is, I mean, with them letting Marv Levy in, it means Marvin Lewis has an outside shot.
Well, only you can tell us for sure on that one.
Yeah, I will. Marvin Lewis, I mean, he's great. Steve Atwater would be my next guy. One of the hardest hitting safeties in NFL history. He was a runner-up to the Rookie of the Year in 1989 to Derek Thomas when he had 126 tackles. What I remember from him is Denver could not stop the run until they got him. When they got him, they'd actually bring him down in the box to stop the run, and it led to 126 tackles. He was teamed with another one that probably belongs on this list of guys to at least consider, with Dennis Smith, making up one of the greatest safety tandems in NFL history. And once again, I mean, I believe the greatest game I ever saw Steve Atwater play was probably in the Super Bowl against Green Bay, where he had 6 tackles, 1 sack, 2 passes defensed, and he had a huge hit on that final drive where he knocked out like half the players on the field, I believe. And then luckily, Brett Favre was the quarterback, so there was no danger of losing in the last minute to him. But Atwater was also an 8-time Pro Bowl selection and a member of the 1990s All-Decade team. What's your take on Steve Atwater, Matt?
Love Steve Atwater. The only thing that he didn't do in that Super Bowl 32 is Favre lofted this duck. When it was 15 yards, like it hung in the air forever, and Atwater drops it. And other than that, he played a fabulous game. I'd love the hit against Christian Okoye. That was one of the first times I'd really seen him play. I believe it was a Monday nighter. And I remember I loved Christian Okoye, and he just seemed like he was the most unstoppable back at the time, besides maybe Bo Jackson. and he just clobbered him. He just went down. It was, for a guy his size, you didn't expect to see that, but he was just like one of the hardest hitting safeties I've ever seen. So much fun to watch. Seemed like he had a lot of range, and made a lot of big plays. Yeah, I'm definitely I'm an Atwater fan. Him and Dennis Smith, one of the greatest duos ever.
All right, Joe?
Just to add on to your statements, in total agreement, also a great leader of that team. He didn't take a backseat to anyone, and he was a tremendous leader in that team. Great player, very deserving. You wonder what some of the guys we're talking about, you wonder what these voters are looking at. I have no idea.
Good Lord.
Well, that brings us to our last guy, which is a guy that, if you look at the stats, probably shouldn't be in. But you're looking at the first minority quarterback to ever win a Super Bowl. Just so you know, Matt, we've been trying to find somebody to have that argument that thinks Brett Favre was a great quarterback. So I sent a message back to Dave asking him if he liked Favre, and he said not really. So if there's anybody out there that is a huge Brett Favre fan and thinks he's one of the greatest quarterbacks ever, we will do a show with you as a co-host for 45 minutes, and you can defend Brett Favre, and we'll try to pick him apart. I would say pick him off, but that's too easy, especially at the end of the show. But no, we got Jim Plunkett, first minority to win a Super Bowl as a quarterback. He won 2 Super Bowls. He was a 1971 NFL Rookie of the Year. He played on some really bad New England teams with really bad offensive lines. We're running out of time here, so I got to speed this up. But my point is this. His stats are not great, but his stats mirror Joe Namath. Joe Namath is in the Hall of Fame because he won Super Bowl III. I'm sorry. Joe Namath's team kicked 3 field goals and scored 1 touchdown. Jim Plunkett was the MVP of Super Bowl 15, and I think threw 2 or 3 touchdown passes. Super Bowl 18, I think he threw a couple more. Never threw a pick. He was a big reason why those Raiders team won 2 Super Bowls. So, I mean, in a perfect world, is he one of the 10 greatest quarterbacks I've ever seen? No. But when you look at other people and what they've achieved, they're in the Super Bowl for achieving a heck of a lot less than what Jim Plunkett did. What's your feelings on Jim Plunkett, Joe?
Always one of my favorites, a big physical guy. He was the number 1 draft pick for a bad Patriots team. He got beaten up. Then he went to a bad 49ers team. Sorry, Matt, and he got beaten up there.
Oh, no.
No apologies. He actually had to take almost 2 years off just to rest his body. And then when Dan Pastorini got hurt, the rest is history. Jim Plunkett took over, and he was great. He was really great. And then he also overcame a lot of personal hardships. Very tough guy.
All right, Matt, you got 1 minute.
Okay, I like Jim Plunkett. But to me, I'd rather have Stabler. The stats over cumulative are pretty similar. I think I'm a little bit more of a Stabler fan, but I like Plunkett a lot, and especially what he did do in those Super Bowl runs.
Plunkett won 2 Super Bowls. Stabler won 1. You know that, right?
Yeah, I'll give you that.
With about the same stats.
Yeah, I'm good with that. I understand. That's
okay.
I like Plunkett.
All right.
No, I wasn't saying either way.
All right, we're about out of time. We've got like 1.5 minutes, 2 minutes left here. Remember, tomorrow night, it'll be me and Matt's draft show. We're going to try to get Joe on there. Like I said, he's getting up there in age, so sometimes he can't stay up that late. But if he can come in, he is a Giants fan. We'll get his take on the Giants pick maybe, and then he can go back. Then he can go to sleep at like 11:35, 11:40, because he has stayed up till 11:45 tonight. Friday night we will have a Floyd Mayweather Manny Pacquiao preview show. We'll have some special guests, including Dave, who called in tonight from Boston. Thanks for calling in tonight, Dave. Dave has got a boxing site on Facebook called, I think it's Mythical Boxing. Dave, if you're listening, I'm going to bring you in here so you can tell everybody where to find your Facebook page. You there, Dave?
Yes. Hi, Mike. Thank you. Yes, it's just labeled Mythical Boxing, and yeah, my name is Dave Sidursky, and if anybody's interested in joining, just ping me on Facebook.
All right. Now, we're about out of time. Matt and Joe, just say bye real quick because we got like 20 seconds.
Thanks for joining us.
Good night, everybody.
All right. We'll catch you next time, which will be tomorrow night on The Grueling Truth. Everybody have a great night. Thanks for listening in.
All right.